not saying that religion can't ever be useful or inspire good things. It certainly can and has and will, and that's better than the alternative. But there's a distinction. We have to recognize there's a distinction between something being true and something being useful. I mean, every religion, every benign religion, every religion that's actually helping somebody sometimes could be functioning like a placebo. I mean, it could be totally barren of content and still useful in certain circumstances. I mean, I could invent a religion right now, which we know is not true, and would be extremely useful if I could spread it to billions. Now, I invent it right now. This religion is, the principles are, do your best to love your neighbor and your family and every person you meet. Encourage your children to study science and mathematics to the best of their abilities. And if you don't do this, you will be punished for eternity by 17 demons after death. Now, I have no doubt that if I could spread this to billions, this would be a better religion than the religions we've got. It would be better than Christianity and Judaism and Islam. You'd have no suicide bombers. What you would have is a generation of children bearing down on science and mathematics to the best of their abilities, encouraged by their otherwise ethical parents, all under the compulsion of do this or else. The 17 demons will torture you for eternity. The usefulness of this, I mean, we would live in a much better world, no question. The usefulness of this, would this suggest for a moment that these 17 demons actually exist? Would it provide a reason to believe in these 17 demons? Not even slightly. So that's the divide here. There's a big difference between the utility of an idea or the consoling nature of an idea. I mean, the idea that God has a plan for me or everything happens for a reason, and the idea that these are consoling is quite distinct from whether there are good reasons to believe them. I think that there's this myth that unless you think one of your books was dictated by the creator of the universe and there he told you what good and evil are, you'll just have no basis for morality. I mean, you need religion in some sense to have a generalizable morality. Without religion, there's no way to say the Nazis were really wrong to do what they did or believe what they believed. I think that's clearly untrue. I think we have some very serviceable intuitions about what good and evil are and what constitutes an ethical life, and we converge on those intuitions. I mean, every culture agrees that cruelty is wrong. That taking pleasure in the suffering of others is wrong within the context of your in-group. I mean, many cultures think it's good to take pleasure in the suffering of people who are not part of your tribe. But in terms of who you're going to admit into your moral sphere, we have some very serviceable intuitions about how we treat the people we accept in our sphere. And the challenge for modernity, the challenge for civilization, is to extend the sphere of our moral community to include the entire species and even other species, so that we really don't have these us and them boundaries that we have. And our us and them boundaries are really propped up by dogmatism. I mean, they're propped up by nationalism, they're propped up by racism, and there's many ways to divide your world dogmatically. But the most insidious us and them boundary, from my point of view, is religion. I mean, it really is. Religion posits a transcendental object between you and this other person. I mean, not only are you different because of your skin color or your political persuasion or because you speak a different language, you are different for all time. For what you believe about God and what he believes about God are so opposed and it's going to require eternity an eternity of punishment in his case to work out that difference. So I think it's a very I think this question of morality is an important one to focus on, because many people are attached to religion not because they're convinced that the metaphysics make sense, but because they just see no other alternative to teaching kids, right and wrong. I think there's a few obvious things to point out. One is that we clearly don't get our morality out of our holy books, because when you go into the holy books, they are bursting with cruelty. I mean, the Old Testament, the New Testament, the Quran, these are profoundly cruel and morally ambiguous books at best. I mean, the Ten Commandments, the first 4 commandments have nothing to do with morality. They have to do with theological offenses. Don't take any other gods before me. Don't take God's name in vain. No graven images, etc. Don't work on the Sabbath. What are you supposed to do when people break those commandments? You're supposed to kill them. I mean, this is unbelievably immoral. And yet, and we're not doing that now, not because the book itself is so wise. I mean, to take a more relevant example, slavery. I mean, slavery is clearly endorsed in the Bible. It's endorsed in the Old Testament. It's endorsed in the New Testament. We all agree that slavery is wrong. We conquered that ground morally through some very hard-fought conversations and also wars. Religion was of very little help in that. I mean, it's true that abolitionists were cherry-picking Scripture, trying to find ways to justify their project. But their project wasn't coming from Scripture, because Scripture is clear. It supports slavery. The evil of slavery is not recognized in the Bible, and it is certainly not repudiated in the Bible. And so the slaveholders of the South were on the winning side of that theological argument, and religion was an impediment to making that moral progress. Again, the fact, even if it were not an impediment, even if it were extremely useful, that would not be a reason to believe that any of our books were dictated by an omniscient being.